So I've been thinking all day about doing this, and I just got time to do it right now. So I'm gonna do really two things in this video, and I'm not gonna do any edits. The two things I'm gonna do in this video is I'm gonna go through the Vanity Fair article about Tom Bombadil being in the Rings of Power. That's the first part of what I'm gonna do. And then the second part, I wanted to get into basically talking a little bit about how Tom Bombadil actually appears in the literature. So that's what I want to do. Let's get to it. So they had the Vanity Fair article, I believe it was this morning. So Tom Bombadil has been finally invited onto one of the long winding roads through Middle Earth. So I had to stop shooting. I was losing I was losing control of the camera. So I'll go ahead and continue. So the mystical character is one of the more offbeat figures in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings saga. A woodland-dwelling man with an ethereal presence and a penchant for nonsense songs and brightly colored clothes, who helps rescue the hobbits from peril early in the first book, The Fellowship of the Ring. So I don't really know how I feel about that the songs are nonsense songs. I really sort of like feel some type of way about that. Especially like, I know there's some people that really don't like the lyrical twist or the fact that a lot of times there actually are songs in the literature. I don't have a problem with that. That really is like a plus. Let's continue. As much as he stands apart, his name would likely draw a blank from anyone who hasn't read the novels, since the two primary film retellings, Ralph Bakshi's animated 1978 opus and Peter Jackson's Oscar-winning live-action trilogy, both cut him from the narrative completely. So for some reason, I don't know, in the article, I think they didn't edit it properly, so they said both cut the him. That was a mistake, so I'm just correcting it. Not going to edit this from the narrative completely. Now, Old Tom, as the books refer to him, is finally getting his moment in the sun. Excuse me. I don't have a problem with Tom Bombadil getting his moment in the sun. Don't really have a problem with that. I don't know if it's going to work in Rings of Power. That's what I'll say right now. So, continuing on with the article, The Rings of Power, the Amazon Prime Video series based on Tolkien's ancient history of his fantasy realm, loosely based maybe, will break that tradition of exclusion and finally feature Tom Bombadil. So another added thing is that when we had the rumors that had come out previously, it wasn't really sure, whereas one of the rumors was that Tom Bombadil was going to be in it, and I think pretty much now, if I look back on it, probably maybe all the rumors are going to be correct. So let's see, in his flamboyant wardrobe, with its second season begins August 29th. I don't know if I saw his yellow boots, to be honest. I think he's got a blue top in the scene still where they have him talking to the stranger who is the stranger in Astaria, or is the stranger Gandalf? I think they're probably going to have the stranger be Gandalf. Let's see. Bombadil was described in Tolkien's books as older than the old, a benevolent entity who began life around the time all life began. So his existence in this earlier era, thousands of years before the events of The Lord of the Rings, fits within the canon established by the author. In a 1937 letter to his publisher, mulling a possible sequel to The Hobbit, Tolkien described Bombadil as the spirit of the vanishing Oxford and Berkshire countryside. The author bristled at the notion that he wrote an allegory, but it's clear he saw Bombadil as nature personified, right up to the character's ambivalence about interfering in the larger world around him. So I think that's a great segue for one of my first Tom Bombadil quotes. And this is from the Fellowship of the Ring. This is Goldberry describing Tom Bombadil. He is the master of wood, water, and hill. That left showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay to figure out exactly how he might turn up in their show and why. Okay, the why, but is the time frame on or is the time frame off? There's a reason why he hasn't been in prior adaptations, because in some ways he's sort of an anti-dramatic character. Payne tells Vanity Fair for this exclusive first look. He's not a character who has a particularly strong agenda. He observes drama but largely doesn't participate in it. In the Fellowship of the Ring, the characters kind of just go there and hang out for a while, and Tom drops some knowledge on them, adds McKay. Knowledge that's not particularly relevant to anything that they're doing or about to do. Okay, that's potentially one way of looking at it. You let me know if you agree with that or you don't agree with that. Continuing on, Bombadil first turns up when the hobbits run afoul of Old Man Willow, an angry tree in the old forest who swallows Merry and Pippin in the folds of his bark. So I wanted to reference one of the second quotes that I wanted to mention. And it's just sort of like Tom's control over nature. He sang to them, lightening their hearts, and he piped to them, and he harped, and he sang about horses running over the grasses, and about the hills standing up, and about trees. And then they went away into the woods and passed down the full moon's light. And that's in the Fellowship of the Ring. And then, of course, there's the whole concept that the barrow is an old English word for a burial mound. And that kind of reminds me of the Korean burial mounds that they actually have some of those in Japan, burial mounds where Korean kings came over to Japan, just a side note. And white is a kind of ghost. So continuing on, he can be a force for good, but he is challenging to integrate dramatically in that he doesn't have an agenda. He's not driving forward and pushing people to arrive at any particular end, Payne says. I don't have a problem with Tom not having an agenda, but I wonder, do you guys have an agenda? So some people will disagree with me, but that's fine. Tolkien himself was hazy about the character's purpose and said he kept Bombadil in the story even though he didn't have a clear purpose plot-wise. Tom Bombadil is not an important person to the narrative. Not an important person to the narrative. Tolkien wrote in a 1945 letter to his proofreader for The Lord of the Rings, I suppose he has some importance as a comment. I do not really write like that. He represents something that I feel important, though I would not be prepared to analyze the feeling precisely. So that's important to really get to Tolkien's words, because Tom Bombadil is not important to the story, but is important. So another great quote from the actual literature. Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood, and hill, by reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. So one of the readers of the book suggested that Tom Bombadil was a stand-in for God himself, prompting Tolkien to reply in another 1954 letter, I really do think you're being too serious, besides missing the point. Above all, Tolkien was determined not to overthink old Tom. And to be quite honest, a side note, another reason why he would do this is because as a man of faith, he wanted to be really clear that Tom Bombadil was not actually his higher power, also known as God. The mystery and passivity of the character made him all the more intriguing to the showrunners, turning him into a narrative riddle to solve. Okay, so in season 2, he's a narrative riddle to solve? Okay. So the mystery and the passivity of the character make him all the more intriguing to the showrunners, turning him into a narrative riddle to solve. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but I'm not really cutting anything. He has no clear dramatic function that would justify his inclusion in a really great movie adaptation. Not sure about that. That's been people's choice up until now. Not sure about that. He's whimsically and magically almost verging on silly. Okay, yeah. But also has the wisdom of the ages in the music of the spheres and deep emotional wells of ancient history and myth. And his conception and function are tied to Norse myths and have deep roots in European fairy tale. Okay, is that going to happen? Is that going to come about in this actual version of him? McKay says. So weirdly, he's kind of most like Lord of the Rings thing in Lord of the Rings, and also the first thing you would cut if you were adapting it as a film. Okay, yeah, okay. But I mean, I don't know why you would be an apologist for Jackson. I mean, that's the choice Jackson made. I don't know why that came up in conversation. That's just my take on it, though. But we have the advantage of a television show, and hence we're going to find a way to tap into that. So I think you added him because of the criticisms that you guys were so far off lore. So Tolkien offered a few clues in the 1954 letter to his proofreader explaining why Bombadil chooses to break his neutrality and help the hobbits. The story is cast in terms of a good side and a bad side. So I had a recent comment, and I think this is close to it, that up until now, all adaptations of the literature, like for example, The Rings of Power, I think it's more on the dark side, but they really didn't show the good side. And a lot of Tolkien stuff is really clearly rooted in a demarcation between good and evil, which, though a lot of the things brought to bear are centered in European mythology, his actual faith is present through all of his literature. So going back to what Tolkien actually said, the story is cast in terms of a good side and a bad side, beauty against ruthless ugliness, tyranny against kingship, moderated freedom with consent against compulsion that has long lost any object save mere power. Tolkien wrote, to somebody like Bombadil, he said, the question of the rights and wrongs of power and control might become utterly meaningless to you, and the means of power quite valueless. So we just go and continue on. Tolkien described Bombadil as a natural pacifist view, which always arises in the mind when there is a war. But also he believed that the character would tip the scale of fate in favor of the hobbits and their fellowship. And I'm just going to riff off here because the hobbits were good. The hobbits were not like, to be honest, like the Harfoots of our first season, leaving their friends dead and so forth and so on. The hobbits of the literature were obviously good, and coming against the forces of evil rising in the eastern portion of Middle-earth. Ultimately, only the victory of the West will allow Bombadil to continue or even to survive. Nothing would be left for him in the world of Sauron. And in the world of Sauron, there would be nothing left for Bombadil. Excuse me. So this was the key for the Rings of Power showrunners. We started thinking, what does he care about and how can it be a doorway or drama? Another reason why I'm pretty much going through the whole article is that at times I have people that come to me and they get really deep into what I'm saying, but now I'm pretty much going to read most of what they say. I'll skip a little bit of it. If you want to read the article, you can read it for yourself, but I'm pretty much going to go through most of what they're saying so that way people can't say I put words in people's mouths. Yeah, I'm going to ad lib because this is a video, but I'm going to go through pretty much everything they said. So what does he care about, and how can that be a doorway to drama? All right. We know he cares about the natural world, and we know he is a helper. He's not going to push you, but he will help you. Okay, yeah, I'm going to jump a little bit. So for the series, Payne and McCain took the liberty of giving Bombadil a second home on the outskirts of a region called Rune. In our story, he has gone out to the lands of Rune, which we learn used to be sort of Edenic and green and beautiful, but now is sort of a dead wasteland, Payne says. Tom has gone out there to see what's happened as he goes on his various wanderings. So that's the same place where the second season of The Rings of Power finds the halflings Nori, Markella Kavanaugh, and Poppy, Megan Richards, as they escort the amnesiac wizard known as the Stranger, Daniel Wyman, toward discovering his purpose. At the end of the first season, the Stranger gave off some major Gandalf signifiers using terminology that is particularly to the wise old sorcerer played by Ian McKellen in the Jackson films. Expect Tom Bombadil to offer the Stranger some rare compassion in this otherwise merciless place. As Payne explains, when he finally crosses paths with the Stranger, you could say he has a desire to try to keep the destruction that has happened there from spreading to his beloved lands in the West. He nudges the Stranger along his journey, which he knows will eventually protect the larger natural world that he cares about. So I'd say our Tom Bombadil is slightly more interventionist than you see in the books, but only by 5% or 10%. Okay, fair enough. But I know right off, like with the section that I read, that the major problem that many people who are going to watch this are going to have is with the whole location and the timeline. So one quick side note is Tom Bombadil is being played by Rory Kinnear. And I'm now at the section of the article where we're going to talk about him. Rory Kinnear is a good actor. So that part, and I've just been noticing that a lot of people, or it's been kind of like a 50-50 thing about the approach or how people feel about Tom Bombadil being in the second season. But Rory Kinnear is a good actor. We can't, I'm seeing some of the comments, but Rory Kinnear is a good actor. So just riffing off that, so there are people who know the books, people who knew it from the films, and this is Rory Kinnear talking about an article, and there are people who have managed, and there are those who have managed to get to 46 without knowing that much about it all, talking about himself. But he said that, just I'm speeding through it. I'll go away and I'll read it and I'll get back to you. So I went downstairs to my partner who did know the books and does know the films. And I said, I've been offered this part. Apparently it's in the books, a guy called Tom Bombadil. She was like, no way, you're not playing Tom Bombadil. So I sort of knew instantly that it had a cultural heft to it that I was going to have to be sensitive to. So I don't know. I don't know if I feel any way, one way or the other about that. I don't think that's negative necessarily. So Kinnear makes it clear that his partner, fellow Penny Dreadful actor Pandora Collin, was simply surprised to hear that the show would feature Tom Bombadil. She wasn't disputing his casting. No, she was excited. That was her excited face. She was like, I can't believe that. Her words were, he's my favorite character in all the books. So as perplexing as Bombadil may be, even to his creator, this quirk is also part of his charm. Readers of The Lord of the Rings have been pining for a Bombadil screen appearance for years, prompting Jackson to explain that he left the character out precisely because he interrupts the story's central quest, which was his choice to do so with the movies. I'm going to speed through that section. So absent has only made the heart of the Lord of the Rings fandom grow fonder for old Tom. In addition to his prominent role in the new season of The Rings of Power, HarperCollins is publishing a new edition of Tolkien's 1962 book, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, featuring his poems about the ethereal figure, some of which date back to long before his epic trilogy. The book's set to hit shelves August 20th. Oh, it's going to hit shelves August 20th before The Rings of Power starts. So that's a new book, or rather it's an updated version. Yeah, new edition. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. August 20th is aimed at the enduring fascination Tolkien readers have for this enigmatic fantasy figure. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the book is going to be better than The Rings of Power one way or the other. And it'll definitely be better than The Rings of Power because, of course, it's the authoritative source. So he has his origins in the names of a wooden doll that lived in the Tolkien family. And like many of the toys owned by the children, such as the teddy bears who appeared in Mr. Bliss or the metal dog that inspired the hero of Rover Random, Tom Bombadil was drawn into Tolkien's invented world. Chris Smith, the publishing director for the company's Tolkien titles, tells Vanity Fair. His first known appearance was in the 1920s in the story entitled Tom Bombadil. And even in this fragment, which is included in the new edition of The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, he is described as one of the oldest inhabitants in the kingdom. And later in early 1930s, Tom Bombadil is put into a Tolkien poem. So they reference the 1934, it's found in Oxford magazine, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. Having lived for millennia, he has learned and understood its deeper mysteries, and perhaps this is why he has now become master, as he is called by himself and his wife Goldberry, and why he is free from any control by the outside world, Smith says. So those symptoms were not much help to Kinnear, who had to bring humanity to this walking and talking symbol of harmony with nature. Much of that responsibility fell to Payne and McKay's new scenes, in which Tom Bombadil offers playful guidance to the otherwise heavy and ominous stranger. So we'll see how this goes. I think it'll either be really, really good. It could be mid, I don't know, or it could be really, really bad. So there's this huge sense of experience, huge openness, huge empathy, and having gone through so much that he knows if the small things that are important, that feel actually quite domestic, feel quite reachable in terms of my understanding of who he was. So I wanted to get into my other quotes, and then I'm going to finish off the article. And I did the video the way that I did it because I wanted to try to really kind of get it out. And I kind of felt like if I took a lot of time with the edits, then it would be like 3 days or 4 days from now, which it would to chop it down. Didn't really want to do that. And maybe I could have done a live, but this is how it came down. So another quick point from the literature around Tom Bombadil, and the article actually references some other passages that I'm going to go through. So Tom Bombadil's own introduction: Tom's country ends here, and he will not pass the borders. And then, of course, one of the most important qualities of Tom is his immunity to the ring. With that, he put it to his eye and laughed again. And then he spun it on his thumb, and it disappeared, almost as if he had cast it far into the shadows. So Tolkien himself laid out the look of the character writing in chapter 6 of The Lord of the Rings. Suddenly hopping and dancing along the path, there appeared above the reeds an old battered hat with a tall crown and long blue feathers stuck in the band. With another hop and a bound there came into view a man, or so it seemed, and at any rate he was too large and heavy for a hobbit, if not quite tall enough for one of the big people, though he made noise enough for one, stumping along with great yellow boots on his thick legs and charging through the grass and rushes like a cow going down to drink. He had a blue coat and a long brown beard. His eyes were blue and bright, and his face was red as a ripe apple, but creased into 100 wrinkles of laughter. That's beautiful stuff. His boots are yellow. The jacket is blue, and he's got a feather in his hat. So all the main beats were hit, Kinnear says, comparing Bombadil's flamboyant style to the way a child dresses. My daughter is 10, and for a year and a half, she wore a sheep hat throughout the school day and through the hottest summer. It was just the face of a sheep with a big, long, woolly straps around the side. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. And then he goes on riffing about his daughter. The other major inspiration for his Tom Bombadil came from the freshness of childhood. The other major inspiration for his Tom Bombadil came not from the freshness of childhood, but from the permanence of extreme age, more geological than biological. The big thing was, how's he going to talk? There are lots of different dialects and accents going on throughout the show, and I wanted him to be somewhat distinct from those, Kinnear says. But I also wanted to choose an accent that felt old, that was British, but felt like the oldest part of Britain. So he goes on, Rory Kinnear, he goes on to the next passage, and he says that he was on a trip to Cornwall, and he decided to pick a Cornish accent, which maybe that's appropriate, maybe that isn't appropriate, but that's the decision. So we'll be hearing a Cornish accent as Tom Bombadil, or Tom Bombadil with a Cornish accent in the series. So as I begin to kind of wind down this video on Tom Bombadil in the Rings of Power, the first look, I really think that my thinking is they decided to put Tom Bombadil in season 2, mostly because a lot of what they're doing has been really pretty dark. So I'm assuming that they wanted to lighten season 2 and not necessarily have Tom Bombadil be comedic, but Tom Bombadil is light, is on the lighter side, and so that's what they were going for. Okay, so I hit most of the points of the article. I think I only skipped like 2 paragraphs, and this thing is ran a little bit long, but I wanted to get it out. So as season 2 of the Rings of Power gets underway, Tom Bombadil offers aid and comfort not just to the stranger, but also to the audience. I think that's what I was just riffing on. I think really they were just trying to lighten it up, because outside of Tom Bombadil, a lot of it sounds like gross darkness, or just really dark stuff about, orcs on fire, and, Adar and power, and, just mostly Sauron-based action. So season 1 set the pieces on the chessboard, and in season 2 the pieces are in motion, and it's really about the villains. It's about the villains. To be honest, season 1 was really just about the villains, but about the villains, you've got Sauron, who's not cloaked behind the guise of the human refugee Halbrand anymore. He's not, but he's coming back as Anatar, so you're stepping over that, but okay. The audience knows he's Sauron, so we're now watching him maneuver as he's manipulating Adar, who's another big villain of the season. Really, Tom is sort of a curiosity within that structure, because while it is darker, Tom Bombadil is singing insane lines that could be nursery rhymes from children's poems. I didn't, I'm really just reacting to this in real time. I didn't prepare anything. That's why, it is what it is. So he sort of defies the tonal shift of the rest of the season, and is a real point of light amidst an otherwise sea of darkness. I didn't read this. I didn't pre-read this. Tom Bombadil brings this levity while remaining somewhat in the shadows himself. And Payne and McKay have decided not to answer any questions about the character that Tolkien himself left deliberately unresolved. And, I think the final words is that the main point, even though what I've seen is it's a mixed bag in terms of like people's reactions to whether, Tom should have been in season 2 or not. The main reason is that they wanted to lighten the load. They, because other than that, it'd just be gross darkness. So for those who made it this far, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm working on some other videos that are not necessarily Rings of Power related or Tolkien related. And I'm going to try to get those out maybe also this week. And then I have other stuff that I'm working on. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate the support. Like, share, subscribe. Check out the links. Buy me a coffee. And I'm out. Or maybe I'm not.